We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Through the unknown remembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover...
All right, welcome back to Suburban Tongue, everybody. Today I'm here with Simon and Julie, two of the only members of Twin Peaks. I got the pleasure of meeting them back in
Twin Lakes.
Twin Lakes, sorry.
That's good.
David Lynch is on the brain.
Yeah.
I got the pleasure of meeting them back in 2023 whenever they did a live show, and I loved their sound. I think it sounded amazing live, and whenever I listened to their CD, it actually carried over, which doesn't normally happen with many artists. So I was really happy to get them onto the show. So just starting off, that actually kind of leads into one question that I wanted to ask, just kind of for fun. Where did the name Twin Lakes come from?
So initially it was, there's this town I went through in Colorado that was really tiny. And I thought it was really cute. And so I just I took a picture somewhere in the mountains, and I couldn't remember what the town was called or where it was. So I was going back to my phone. You know how iPhones have that handy feature that tells you where you took the picture. It just said Twin Peaks on it, or Twin Lakes.
Now I got you.
R.I.P. David Lynch.
I know. I think that's why I was thinking about it.
Yeah, probably. Well, it's. But I have a funny story about the whole Twin Peaks thing. But yeah, it was just a place called Twin Lakes, Colorado, and that's where I initially had the name in my back pocket, just I was thinking of changing my own my solo stuff's name, and so when Julia and I got together to make music, we were thinking of what should we call ourselves, and I just kind of pulled that out. So
for sure, and we know that there's a Twin Lakes in somewhere close to Pittsburgh too, so that's kind of cool to know that a lot of people think we named it after Twin Lakes in Pittsburgh, which we didn't, but it's cool to think that it also has ties to Pittsburgh too. So.
Or people do think we're called Twin Peaks, and it doesn't help because I have a Twin Peaks sweatshirt, and there was one time we were we were playing a show at Roboto with I think Mechanical Canine, and one of the guys from the band was oh, you guys must be Twin Peaks. And I was I'll give him credit because I was wearing a Twin Peaks sweater, and I didn't make it easy.
Yeah. I think it's funny that that this now has become my mistake again, because I actually think whenever I met you guys at that show and bought your CD that I asked you if the name was from Twin Peaks. And
a lot of people do. They ask us if it's a reference to Twin Peaks, and so sometimes I'll tell them that because it's fun. It gives us street cred.
Yeah. But so you said that right now you're on a bit of a hiatus just because of being busy with work and with school. But whenever you are in the process of writing, what's your process of approaching writing and approaching songwriting?
So a lot of times in the past, it was kind of just a lot of the times. What's that Phoebe Bridgers line about? I'll sing it like I wrote it.
Yeah, something like that. Oh my gosh, it's
It's I didn't.
I wish I something I wish I wrote it, but I didn't. So I'll sing the words or something.
Yeah, so I memorize the words, and so a lot of times when I come up with things on guitar or me personally, I know Julia probably has a different process, but when I come up with things personally, it's because I hear another song. And I'll learn how to play that song, and I'll play it over and over, and then I'll start messing with how that song sounds, or I'll start trying to emulate, different sounds, different people, and then I'll come up with something that I really like, and then I mostly like to start with just a nice chord progression or something like that, and then
usually pretty simple too. It's nothing. Yeah. We do a lot of repetitive chord progressions because I think then it gets us just kind of started, and we'll make lyrics. I'll start saying something, and then Simon will be I like that, maybe let's try this, and we'll just kind of keep working with the lyrics.
We freestyle almost, and then go back and forth until we keep lines that we write. So some of our lines they'll just come right out of our mouths, and we'll be okay, that's good, let's keep that. And then other ones will have the general structure of the sentence, and then we'll workshop it and figure out what works. But yeah, with the way with guitar, we saw Field Medic a couple years ago at Bottle Rocket, and one of the things he said was if the song's more than 2 chords or it's too hard to play, I don't if it's too hard for me to play live, I don't like to play it.
Yeah.
And I kind of agree with that. So a lot of our songs I don't know, I always get embarrassed when I play and I worry that there's like people who really know how to play guitar in the background. Like when we play with like More Than Adequate. I don't know if you've seen More Than Adequate, but
Maybe, yeah.
Oh my god, that guy on guitar, the way he like plays guitar is insane.
Yeah.
And so I always worry that like when I'm playing up on stage, people can see like how ridiculously simple all of our songs are. And they're like going like, oh wow, that's not a real chord or that's not a real riff. But it is what it is.
I mean, and there's something too, like the limited approach, especially to chords into songwriting. I mean, because out of like the different writing that I've done, songwriting has always been one that I've struggled with, just with like melody. But I've always found that the songs that I'm the proudest of really are those like 4-chord songs, and or 3-chord or whatever. And I think I do agree with that. Yeah, if you can't play it live, why write it in the studio? But there really was, like, at least I felt this way, there really was a power to that simplicity whenever I heard you guys live, and I think, like, maybe it was the room, maybe it was the atmosphere, and it carried through really powerfully. And I mean, I love Bob Dylan as well. I don't know, like, if you guys listen to him as much.
I am like a Bob Dylan super fan.
I love Bob Dylan.
I am
I saw the movie.
Yeah, my aunt.
I still need to see that. Yeah,
it's really good.
I didn't
Timothy
get the
Chalamet
chance
does
to.
an incredible Bob Dylan impersonation.
Yeah, it seems like it.
It's nuts. It's actually so good. As someone who like loves and knows so much about, especially that period in Bob Dylan's life, is like that's the one like everyone likes. But like I really like Bob Dylan. He's kind of a hero of mine, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, my dad and my mom, I grew up listening to Bob Dylan and Nick Drake and Neil Young, and those were like the primary people. Oh, and my mom would always play Dan Wilson. He's the guy in the Semisonics who wrote Closing Time.
Yeah.
But his solo stuff is like really, really pretty, really beautiful, and I remember my mom always playing that in the car.
Yeah. I mean, and poetry really does speak the loudest through that kind of songwriting, and I think like for your style of like that kind of folk indie kind of whatever you would define yourself as, that's kind of how I look at it. Like that really does let the message speak through. I also did want to ask, and you said about like having similar kind of chord progressions and melodies that you use. I realized whenever I was re-listening to the CD on my way here that there was sort of some motifs that came in and out like throughout the different songs, and I think the line is "It's all I do." Is that what it is, or am I mishearing it? Okay, I'm glad, because I couldn't tell, because at some points it sounded a bit different. Was that purposeful? Like whenever you were putting together the album, like were those songs you picked those specifically because of those motifs? Or?
So, well, the thing about that album is, I don't mean to talk too much if you want to jump in, but so Julia and I have always come together at hard points in our life to write songs. When we first started writing music, it was at a hard point both of our lives. And same thing with this one. And so I guess the motifs are more just kind of how we were feeling at the moment.
Kind of like reoccurring themes that come up, and I think also there are some buzzwords. Like I look back to some of the songs or like melodies, and I think, oh my gosh, like there is that theme that kind of carries over through the songs, which helps with putting together an album. But it's kind of funny. We'll reuse things.
And in writing the guitar stuff, I was listening to a lot of screamo bands at the time. And I really liked Your Arms Are My Cocoon at that point. And so their tuning for the song Snowy is the tuning that's primarily through the entire album. Because I figured that would be easier to play live if we played shows. Is if we kept it all in one tuning, because I'm sure you saw at Green Beak and I switched guitars like every other song.
Did you ever end up getting a second guitar strap?
Actually I did. But then we realized it'd be even simpler if we just sat down. So we started sitting for our show. It's nicer. It's because, when you're playing like less like energetic type music, it's kind of weird to just stand there. I noticed myself rocking back and forth really weird.
I do that when I sit, so I understand.
Yeah.
Like, I can't ever be still.
But yeah, I guess the one thing that we've always done with our music is to keep it kind of like personal to us, and so I think those motifs aren't so much a product of like we're manufacturing them or like trying to put them in there, but that's just like the like kind of the mood of like what the time was,
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand, because I feel like in retrospect I notice a lot of motifs in like especially my more like poetic things that I write or like short stories, and I look back and I'm like, oh, I can tell exactly like what part of my life I was in whenever I reread it, because it's expressing ideas that I was really wrestling with at the time, or like different things that I was thinking about a lot. And I think that does pull through those, from a listener's perspective. I think that it pulls through a lot of the ideas that you guys are going for with that. Was there any sort of kind of purpose, or was it just kind of more in that line of meeting where you were at the time with the recorded phone calls that you were playing during the CD?
So, I kind of always liked the idea, and I think we both talked about this, was we kind of liked the idea of putting like phone recordings in part of the songs, because again, like the album's so like personal to us, and because you know, like one of the voicemails is from one of my friends, who like just called me randomly and just like, you know, was just like, hey man, like I just want to see how you're doing. And like, you know, like that stuff really means a lot to me, and so I think that throwing them in there was kind of like a nod to, at least for me, like the people in my life who've always been like supportive and always been like friends, like our friends that would come out to our shows all the time, like, you know, like we there was this one guy who just saw us one time. His name's Eric, so shout out Eric. He's like one of our biggest fans. He would literally just come to our shows and like pay the cover just to see us open for 15 minutes for another band, and then he'd leave.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just, you know, it's like really special to have people like that.
Absolutely. And I know for our song, Nothing Ever Lasts, Something That Lasts, I forget exactly how it goes, but I put my dad in there, and I actually have kind of a funny story about that. So my dad always told me that he wanted me to play like a certain Eagles song on guitar, and it was like a super easy song. It's Take It Easy, like everyone, you know, knows that one. And he was like, I want you to learn this, I want you to learn this. And then like I ended up learning it, and he's since passed away, and I learned that song, and I was like, this is so easy. If only he knew that like this is an easy song. And so I was like, I had one voicemail from him, and I was like, you know, I think that'd be really great. I think he'd really appreciate to be a part of that music, because he was telling me for so long to like play that one song for him. So I just thought that was like, you know, kind of a way to honor him. So
yeah, that's really cool. I did hear that part of the song and was kind of wondering what the meaning behind that is, and that's really cool that it's like as a memory for your dad. I would have never, you know, thought about that, but it really it added to that song, because I do remember that. There's one lyric that that really stuck with me on the way here. It's how does it go? I'm trying to remember the rhyme. It's finally time to tell the truth. 4 years that I've taken to break out. It's taken 4 years to break out of my shell, I think is the lyric. I can't remember what song. It's on the third on the third song. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, that's on Fairy Johnny Cash.
That's what I thought it was called. But I couldn't remember if that was the name or not.
Yeah, and I think we both wrote that song because I think there were a lot of times, especially in like our undergrad and college, where we both felt very like reserved and kind of like lonely, and so and I guess at that time, like we wrote that song, we had just played our first show like the month before at Roboto, and yeah, I don't know, it's kind of hard to like bring meaning to it afterwards, because it feels so in the moment and so like, you know, just of what that time was, and so, you know, I don't know exactly how I was feeling, but
yeah, I mean, I think because art really is the thing where it's like it can be made in one way by the artist and then interpreted so many different ways by the listener. And I mean, that line really resonated with me, because that feels like, I mean, I think that's the plight of most young people, is it feels like those long years of waiting for you to break out of whatever shell that you kind of were in at first. So it sounds like for you guys that music was a big way to help you break out of that. Am I kind of like on the right page there?
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, I think it's like, so I went to school for, you know, being a therapist, and it's really therapeutic. Like, I find it almost like a diary entry, or like you said, like how art can be taken in any different way and can be interpreted in so many different ways. And I think that's what's really cool about, like you were saying earlier, about the simplicity. It's, you know, because when you have such like these like broad or simple quote ideas, you can interpret it in so many different ways. And I think that's the beauty of it.
And I think we both like the simplicity of like how we record songs. I mean, I mean, Julia does master our stuff a little bit. I don't have the mind for that, but I really like at least having some like semblance of it being like stripped down. Like only once or twice did we ever record the guitar separate from the vocals. Normally we'll just like sit down in front of the mic and do it all. Yeah. And because there's this guy I really like, and I'm sure Julia's like sick of hearing his name,
No.
but like, the guy Andrew Schoenman from Worst Party Ever is he has some solo stuff that he's done, and he has like acoustic albums and acoustic songs that he does with Worst Party Ever, and it's literally just him and an iPhone like recording, and they're some of like the like most like beautiful like folk emo songs I've ever heard in my life, and I like draw a lot of inspiration from the way he writes and like how simple his like what he does on guitar is. It's just like really good stuff. It's just really great.
Well, and whenever I first heard the album back, whenever I got it from you guys in 23, I was like kind of coming off of a job where I was doing a lot of like mixing of music and stuff like that. So I was still in that brain of like trying to hear like, what would I add to something if it were mine? And that actually, like, your songs gave me, like, the hardest challenge, and I still listen to it thinking, like, I don't know what I could possibly add to this to, like, enhance it. And I think that it really is, like, what you were saying about the Andrew, what was it, Andrew Schoenman?
Andrew Schoenman is the guy's name,
Is, like, there is something to that, a low-fidelity recording of something where it's, on Blue Snowballs, like what we're doing now, where it brings out something different than something like extremely processed. And I mean, because that has a time and a place, like for the bands like that you were listening to where the guitar player would just be shredding on his instrument. It's like in that respect you would want someone, or you would want microphones that can really pick it up, but in this instance it kind of feels like you're catching this like non-recreatable moment, and it's like it's putting that down to stone. At least that's my feeling, and I mean that's why I really love, like, I think voice memos are like one of my best friends with doing any sort of creative work. But is there like any sort of, after this hiatus or even during this hiatus, is there any sort of things that you guys are working on now, music-wise, or ideas that you're playing with for?
Absolutely, yeah. We have one that's kind of in the process right now. We haven't picked it up in a while, but we're kind of waiting for that right moment of inspiration to hit us, and then we'll probably be back at it. So try not to rush it, because I feel like sometimes...
Yeah, you never want to rush it. I mean, because then you might lose something along the way there.
Yeah, there was a period of time after, because I started writing music in like my sophomore year of high school, and after I graduated, I didn't write anything for like 2 years. I hope that's not the case with this. I don't think it will be. But yeah. And so like it does take like a certain moment of like just like hitting that spark, and a lot of times for me it's just like listening to different artists and like getting like a different like a feel, because what brought me out of like not being able to write music for 2 years was I heard a Worst Party Ever song called Things Change. And it was just like I'd never heard anything like it in my whole life, and I was just like, this is just so cool, and I want to make something like this. And so I've been doing the same thing. I mean, Julia's been showing me a couple, like she showed me a couple artists here and there at the end of, the beginning of like last year, like Sea Rose and what are the other ones? Skull Crusher. And like some of these other like kind of like lo-fi-ish, or Leith Ross, that's another one. Some of these like lo-fi-ish, like more like wistful, folksy kinds of sounds that I like really, really like, and so I've been trying to draw some inspiration from that.
Speaking of new music, not to turn it back on you, but what kind of music do you make?
I think if I can really like put a genre to it, I would say that recently at least I've actually have been working a lot more in kind of this kind of folk genre, because I feel like whenever I was younger, I would, like, a lot of the music I listened to was like classic rock and things like that, but growing out of that and growing into more emotional, more poetic kind of things, I've always felt that was the way that I can best express how I feel, is in a simple guitar with just some vocals, because I don't I don't really consider myself much of a singer. Some people, whenever they listen to it, say like, yeah, you're not too bad, but I don't know. I've never been able to. I'm not much of a melody maker either. So like really, whenever I do write music, it is kind of like just that expression. It's like if I can get an expression out, then that's something. But I would say I work most in like folk and some maybe a little bit of like soft rock kind of thing if I have an electric.
Cool. Do you have like a project name or?
My friends and I are always kind of working with different ideas. No real clear names because I'm always like, hey guys, we need to like make some songs before we make the names. But yeah, and my one friend who's actually been on this podcast a couple times, he and I work a lot, and he is kind of like the vocalist, and I'm more of the guitar player. Yeah, cool. And yeah, we get some good stuff out of that, but it's never been anything we've released. It's just always kind of been like having fun, getting ideas out and stuff like that. We always joke that we're like the John and Paul of the Beatles because like my songs are always seem a lot happier, and his songs always seem a lot more depressed, but. I think that might have just been us during high school. I think we've kind of started to grow out a little bit more from that. I think I've kind of brought in my range, and he's also brought in his range. But
when you do release music, let us know.
Oh, definitely, I will. Yeah, I mean, whenever I heard you guys, actually, I remember going home that night to my girlfriend, and I was like, we need to make like a song, like we need to make songs together where it's like us singing, because I thought that it was just so cool that someone was doing something like that, you know, where you guys are just making it it seems like making it just for the sake of making it. Like, it doesn't seem like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm missing something, but it doesn't seem like you're doing it really ever to get, like, the fame out of it or, like, anything like that. It's just to express how you're feeling.
For sure. Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. That's very sweet. But, yeah, we just, honestly, like, I think that idea of, you know, going forward with, trying to get fame, I think that takes away some of the art with it, and it kind of like loses the meaning of why we started this, and also I just think that's kind of intimidating, and this is something we want to keep fun, so I think if it got, more well-known, that would there'd be a lot of pressure with that, I think.
Yeah, the craziest thing we ever did was we drove to New Jersey for one show.
I mean, that's a pretty far distance.
Yeah, it was great. It was really cool. But I think at that moment we were like, okay, like, we can't like be going on like mini tours. We're not like, we're not that big or that like, it was we were very tired.
Yeah, I would
definitely like do it again. I think that was fun, but definitely not like trying to like force it. Or if it goes that way, it goes that way. That's cool. If it doesn't, that's cool.
Yeah. But I like what you said about making it for the sake of making it, because that was really like our guiding philosophy from the get-go, was just to like make music just because we wanted to, Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that's always, I think all the best things that I could consider to have created have always been like out of that space. I mean, because I definitely have tried to create things to get like some sort of recognition for it, and those just always end up being, I don't know, a little bit less than I think they would have been otherwise. I mean, my children's book that I was telling you about whenever we came in, I didn't even originally write that as a children's book. It was just originally meant as a poem, and then I was reading it thinking, this would be really cool, like if there were some illustrations alongside it, and then it turned into what it became. And maybe along the way with like the things that you create and the things that I create and whoever creates, it's like it kind of has its own life, and then it comes out how it wants to come out, and it's like, so in that department, I've always kind of looked at fame as being like, it's nice if it comes, but if it doesn't come, we still create just to do it. I mean, I keep saying that, like, but I really think that does reinforce a certain point that we, as artistic people, do the art for, because it's like, because you've said a lot, like it comes out of specific times, and like the writing is made easier in a way whenever those times come. And so, if you then have all of those barriers removed and everything kind of becomes easy, then it's like, well, what am I going to write about now? And I mean, that's kind of the joke with a lot of bands, is they become famous and then their second album is like complaining about how famous they are. But what other kind, you said that you were going to college for urban planning, so like what kind of draws you to that? Because I mean, like, I would have never guessed from the limited.
So it's kind of funny, because I started out doing environmental studies, and I worked in recycling for a little bit, which was really, really cool. But my biggest draw always was that, like, I love cities and the way they work, and I love how people, like, interact with the space around them, or how certain parts of the city, the way they're built, affect how people interact, or how they can interact with the way around them, or with the space around them. And so I really got into it because I think cities have like this really great potential to be very like sustainable, and like these walkable communities, and these like places where people can like really come together. And I think that's something that's getting more and more lost in cities is that people don't really interact with the space around them, and I think the way that they want to, or the way that we'd hope they'd want to. And so I kind of got into it because I really like the sociology of like cities and how to make them like better places for people.
So if you like in the future, you know, being assigned to those kinds of projects, how do you take a city from kind of where it's at being only utilitarian to being more fluid and allowing people to live?
It really depends. I mean, one of the points I always like to make is that I feel like a lot of cities try to attract investment and like business investment from whatever is like, you know, the most profitable at the time. Yeah. So for Pittsburgh, that was, you know, 100 years ago, that was steel. Until steel stopped being cool. And then Pittsburgh like got, you know, fell into Act 47, which is like pretty much government bankruptcy. And they got, thank God they got out of that, because they, you know, they managed themselves well. But it's hard, because I think what you need to do with cities, especially places like Pittsburgh, is you need to make them work for the people that live here primarily, and then you'll draw the type of people that want to come here, because, you know, people aren't going to come to Pittsburgh. Like there's this like idea, I guess, of like making certain cities like tech hubs or whatever hubs. And the thing is like we already have those cities. We already have Seattle and Silicon Valley, you know. But if you make Pittsburgh like a city for people who live in Pittsburgh and for what Pittsburgh's like good for, then people will come anyways. You know, like it's difficult to like try and like formulate exactly how cities work. I mean, it's like any school of philosophy. There's like a million different ways to think of how to develop a place. Yeah. You know?
I mean, I've always loved Pittsburgh for that reason. I mean, because I come from also a steel town, you know, being over from Johnstown, and they weren't able to recover from like, you know, whenever that stopped being a big profitable business, like a big profitable enterprise. And it's like, so it's interesting to come from there and see like what it looks like to not be able to come back from something like that, and then coming to Pittsburgh where it does really feel like this is a place that's still alive in a lot of respects. And it really does. I always joke with people that it's like it's the biggest small town, like, and I think I've heard people say that too. It's like the biggest small town in America, because, you know, you drive around and it feels like you're driving in like a suburban area, and then you're like, oh, I'm actually, you know, right by the campus. And it's cool that they were able to pull back from that. And what are you going to school for?
So I just graduated this past year with counseling psychology. So I've been working as a therapist. But that's so cool. You said you're from Johnstown too. That's oh my gosh. We're from Johnstown.
Yeah. Oh my God! Like I was saying all that, like not even knowing that you guys.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I was like,
what high school did you go to?
I went to Richland.
Oh, okay. We went to Westmont.
Oh, okay. I don't know too many people from Westmont. I know more who went to Johnstown, like down in the city. That's so cool. Like I never even like made it. I never knew that.
Yeah. I swear I've met more people from Johnstown and Pittsburgh than I do in Johnstown, which is cool.
I mean, I know a couple of people from this school even that went to school with me. Oh. So I think because in my mind Pittsburgh has always been, like I was saying, and so I guess now like we're all on the same page, knowing that we're from the same place. But at least in my mind, Pittsburgh has always been like that. Like it's like feels like where I'm from, but like with more bells and whistles attached to it.
Well, yeah, it's even laid out almost the same. Like,
yeah, it really is.
We have north and south hills. We have rivers running through our city.
Yeah, and it feels like with Pittsburgh too, it has more of that history built into it, I think, which is also why it was able to stand stronger, because I mean it has the forts and it has all that stuff. Because like with Johnstown, there isn't too much history beyond like when the floods happened. Like that's kind of like all Johnstown I think has to really offer history wise. But like with Pittsburgh, it's like you read about Pittsburgh in really any book that you read about American history, because of all the stuff that was happening here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, sure. And on that, you bring up a really good point too, about, you know, bringing people together. And I think that kind of going back to music, like I think music brings people together, especially in Pittsburgh. We've seen like the underground scene, and that like everyone's so sweet, everyone's so like welcoming and really respectful to all the musicians. And I just think that like that's something super cool that I think they're kind of trying to do that a little bit in Johnstown. Like I know some really cool venues, but it's been super awesome to move here and see a lot of the
it's like already been here, because I feel the same way with Johnstown too, because that was actually one of the reasons I started this podcast in the first place, was because they really have been trying to bring a lot of culture back to that area. and they have this culture crawl once a year where they kind of like showcase all that. And whenever I went there, I think it actually was also in 2023, was whenever I had the idea to do this podcast, because I was like, wow, there actually, like is a lot of things here that I just never knew about. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to do it whenever it's so far from the prime of a place. And I mean, I guess you would know the most about that, having studied it, but it's like, I feel like the longer you wait to start, getting that train back rolling, it's really hard to do it.
Yeah, it's hard for the steel towns, because I mean, they try, it's easier, it's an easier investment. The infrastructure's already there, so they're they're kind of trying to. I mean, I don't think Johnstown's still trying to get the steel mills back. Obviously, they're not coming back. But I think there is a lot of work being done in Johnstown still to like revitalize the area and just make it like a very like nice, livable place. I mean, there are a lot of people moving back. There are a lot of like things going on in Johnstown that are like really cool and interesting.
I don't know if you've ever been to Boma, but
yeah, like Boma,
they're super cool.
Is that in Johnstown?
Yeah, it's in an old church.
Okay.
The
Actually,
venue
never heard of
Emerging
that.
Arts. We actually we just played a show with some of our friends there last. I don't remember, November, September, something like that.
I actually have never even heard that place.
Oh,
I
yeah,
thought,
no,
I thought
they
I heard
do,
like all the new stuff
yeah,
around town.
they do. It's been around for a long time. I mean, my brother played there when he was in a band a long time ago. Yeah, it's like a really nice venue. I mean, we probably got our start playing music live at Flood City Cafe.
Oh, I love
You know,
Flood City.
when they had their open mic nights on Fridays.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool to like hear that you guys are from that area as well. It's funny because like I always talk about it to people as if like they've never heard of it. I mean, because like you know that it's no one ever hears of the place, and you're like, I'm basically from Pittsburgh. It's like the same area. So, do you think you're going to stay in this area then, or do you have plans to move somewhere else after college?
Yeah, no, we really want to stay in this area, at least for now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've always really loved Pittsburgh. I love it as a city. I think it really is truly a city of neighborhoods. Each neighborhood is so incredibly different and cool and has their own thing. You know, like, I mean, like
They're so integrated too. Like you have the distinct neighborhoods, but then there's always like they're connected. They're so close to one another. You're in one neighborhood, then you walk a couple feet and you're in a completely different neighborhood, and it feels so different but so connected at the same time. It's cool.
Yeah,
No cities are like it. I feel like Pittsburgh's pretty
Pittsburgh's
unique.
like a really unique place, and I really like that. I mean, like the houses on the north side look like a Charles Dickens novel, and then you go to Oakland and it's row houses, and you go to Lawrenceville and it's like these really like tightly packed, like also row houses but other houses, and there's like just all this like all these different cultures, and like Polish Hill is where all like the punks are, and Lawrenceville's where the hipsters are, and like Squirrel Hill and Shady Side is like the like more residential or like ritzier areas,
And where all the traffic happens.
and where all the traffic happens. It's like a really great city, and the music scene here is just so cool. We've just met so many incredible people through it, and just like have been able to do so many cool things. I mean, it was really funny when I first started getting into like screamo, and when we first started writing for the second time. There's a Pittsburgh band, Morning Dew, that I like got really into, and their Bandcamp says based in Maryland, so I didn't think they were from Pittsburgh. And at our first show, we played with Leonardo Decapitated, and one of the guys from Leonardo Decapitated said that the guys from Morning Dew were going to show up, and I was
You were,
like,
so
I was like,
excited.
are
You're
you?
like,
I
"Oh
was
my
like, are you
gosh."
kidding me? I was like, no way. And then I don't know. Last year we got to open for them.
Yeah.
Which was just like really sick.
There are a lot of up and coming bands too, like the Chatham Coffee House has been started back up, and that is super cool. I mean, I graduated undergrad in when was that, 2022 in the winter, and since then there some of the people in the class like below me and then a couple classes below like really revitalized that scene. It's been super cool to see, because there weren't any shows for years at the Chatham Coffee House, and then they brought it back. And I wanted to shout out Foch and the Dagwoods.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
just want to say them because they, I mean, like really, like they've done so much with the music scene at like college music scene at Chatham, and then I know that ripples out. So it's just been cool.
Yeah, and then there's like house venues that have like popped up in South Oakland again. And I remember like the first show I ever actually really played like by myself in Pittsburgh was at Rothko House, R.I.P. Rothko House. I played a Bright Eyes cover set on Halloween. But like even some of the other ones, like we played at Kame House, which also R.I.P., and West Egg, also R.I.P.
Oh, wow.
And they, it was just
They'll come
really,
back. They'll
they'll
come
come
back.
back. We love them. And it was just like really cool to like be able to be a part of that scene again. It's just really great. There's just all these bands just like popping out. Like we said, like Foch and the Dagwoods are like really good friends of ours. And like we played a couple shows with them.
And the talent too, like especially like up and coming. I mean, they're so talented. I'm just
they're
blown
incredible.
away.
Like they're incredibly talented people. And it's just like really cool to be just like in the same moment as them. Like I was even saying more than adequate. I mean, I think both of the people in that band are still in high school, if not recently out of high school,
Yeah.
and they're incredibly talented. I mean, like every band we played with is just like it's just incredible to like feel like we're part of the same cultural moment as them.
More like the same zeitgeist. That is,
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. It's so cool, like in any place that you're at, to be able to kind of be on that wave, whatever part of the wave that you're on, and just get to kind of soak in all of that that's happening. I mean, because there never will be a time again in history like the exact time that you're in now. And yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of music that's coming out now is really good, and I think like the smaller stuff is some of the best. I mean, because people, I think, with the advent of the internet and like with all of these new things that are coming out, have been able to so well capitalize off of what that has to offer. And so I think kind of as we look towards wrapping this up, do you have like any future plans beyond like what you're writing now, like maybe to do you think you're going to continue the band for a long time, or is it up to the wind?
Whether or not we write music for the rest of our lives, or like release it, I should say, I think we're always going to want to write. I think we're always going to like, I mean, there are times where we'll just like sit down and just play songs together just because it's fun. It's just like, it's just nice. And so I really hope to continue to like write and for quite a while,
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm kind of, right now in this hiatus, I know we both miss it, and I know the right time will come, and so I'm just like, I'm looking forward to it. And we're going to probably work on an EP next, we think. But yeah, no rush, just kind of seeing where things go.
Yeah.
And I think there's always going to be that itch, though, that we want to scratch of like writing or playing music or just kind of being involved in the Pittsburgh art scene in some way.
Yeah, and we are playing a show soon, which is fun. Like it's our first one back in a while, and I think that's probably going to help us jumpstart that feeling again.
Is it like in the local area? Or?
It's at Bottle Rocket. I wish I remembered all of the names of the I'll pull up the flyer so that we can properly shout it out. But it's put on by Kame House, and it is for Pittsburgh Food Not Bombs. It's with Porch Dog, Pitter Patter, Cassidy Lakes, Michaela Doorjam, Rod and Sid,
It's a big show.
The Smith, and Trailing Iris and Wavespeed. Yeah. So that's March 20th at Bottle Rocket. So we're really excited about that. Yeah.
That's a big. I didn't realize.
I think we're all playing like short
That's
sets.
cool.
But it's really cool. I'm
I'll
really
play full
excited
sets.
for it.
It'll be like 6 hours worth.
Yeah. Well, oh my God. There was one
Marathon.
time we went to go see a band. Excuse Me, Who Are You?
Yeah.
They're like a screamo band. We
Simon's
drove.
favorite band in the
They're
world.
one of my favorite bands in the whole world. They played in Pittsburgh recently, and we went just to see them and talk to them. Yeah, when we went and saw them, and I made Julia drive me to Akron to go see them. But it was a fun day. But man, there were so many bands on that bill.
Yeah.
I think there were like 5 or 6. We were there till like 11. It was.
And it started early too.
It started really early. It started at like 6, but it was really cool. We actually got to meet them and talk to them for a while, which is really cool. And so it's definitely shout out Emway. I know they just released an album. They're getting pretty big now, and so that's exciting to see.
So I ask a variant of this question. I like to at the end of all of my episodes. But each one of you, how has the time since you started kind of pursuing music as your artistic form to now, how has that changed you as a person, and how has that kind of made you realize who it was that you were all along, that maybe that was helping to uncover in yourself?
a hard one. I think it kind of shows just the ways that I've changed over time, the ways I've hopefully grown, the ways I've kind of like recognized how I've, recognized my mind at different points in life, like how I've navigated things. It's definitely helped me through some of those harder moments, but also helped me really enjoy some of the brighter times too. So it's always just kind of been there. It's been something that I'm not the greatest musician. I'm not the but it makes me happy, and just like hearing other people play, being able to, like you said, be in that moment with everyone. It's just cool to be here.
Yeah, I'll agree with a lot of that. That it kind of, shows you who you were in a way, and kind of like you said, like captures that moment. And so I think it's almost like an audio diary of, sometimes I'll go back and like listen to my older music and I'll cringe a little bit because I was like a 20-year-old and I thought I was cool.
Well, and if you don't cringe a little bit, then have you really improved since
yeah
then?
yeah exactly. and so but I'll listen to it and I'll, it also helps me realize that like I always struggle sometimes with thinking that I'm like a creative person, especially because the work I do and the schooling I'm in is a very analytical, very like hardwired thing. And so it's nice to, I guess, see in some way that I can't be creative and I can find this outlet for things. And so it's like it's in a way it's like a snapshot in time, but in another way it's kind of it's almost like it is like poetry. It's like going back and seeing how you're able to express yourself through some of those harder moments, and it's been like a really good tool for like getting some of those feelings out and in a productive way.
And kind of looking back in those brighter moments and like, wow, okay, that was really hard for me, but look at how far we've come.
Yeah, it's actually really funny. I think one of the, and I hope this isn't like too like goofy to say, but it's really funny because I think since we've gotten out of like the really hard time that like produced that album, we're like, do we need to be sad again to like write good music?
We're trying to like think about more like wistful or like upbeat styles of things that we can do, but it has been challenging.
Yeah, it's like it's almost like learning how to walk again. Trying to like find a way to still be expressive and still be and not have those like difficult emotions to work through. And it's challenging definitely, but I think at the end we'll be better artists for it.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely understand that same kind of maybe like you could call it an insecurity about your creativeness. I mean, because I feel like that too. Like I don't always know like what is the exact kind of concoction of variables that leads to me making something, and then it's like whenever I do actually make something, looking back on it, it's like, well, do I need to like try to get back into that mindset to create again? And yeah, I mean I think that is maybe one of the things that makes art difficult, but in a way it also is like kind of what makes it the most fulfilling to people who end up actually getting to do it. And I mean, I think that that's really cool what you guys have done and what you are still continuing to do with your music, and I'm excited to see what comes out of it next, if it's going to be the same sort of genre, or if you're going to go into something completely different. But well, thank you very much for having me in this area. I mean, I'm glad that you were able to get this for me. And yeah, thank you a lot for coming on the show. And I need to say it correctly by the end of the episode, Twin Lakes. I still can't believe I said Twin Peaks. So.